Nicole Bridger.
You know who that was, right?
Yeah, that's pretty cute. Thank you. So my name is Nicole Bridger. It gets a little redundant when you name yourself, your company after yourself. But I am a clothing designer, and I believe in a mindful existence. I have been called eco-conscious, that was up there, green, responsible, sustainable. There's a lot of terms, and personally, I really struggle with how to define it because apparel and sustainability really don't go together. So today's talk, we're going to talk about climate. And I think climate change definitely is something that comes up first, but there's a lot of other forms of climate that I want to talk about later too. So first, I want you guys to think of a piece of clothing that you're wearing, something maybe that you feel pretty stoked on. So how many of you know what that's actually made of? Just a raise of hands. So let's say like a third of you know what it's made of. Okay, same piece of clothing. How many of you know where it was made, just the country where it was made? Okay, pretty good, the same. And how many of you know if it was made ethically or not? Okay, so like 4 or 5. And how many of you actually took any of that into consideration when you were purchasing the item? So, the textile industry right now is probably the leader, it's definitely leading in toxic waste in our world. There are mills in China and Indonesia that are like dumping toxic waste into rivers, and these rivers are the only source of clean water to the surrounding villages and fish. For example, right now there are 320 million people in China, 320 million, who do not have access to clean water because of this kind of toxic waste. It's believed that in the next 50 years, our oceans are going to be dead. That's in our lifetime. There are an estimated 35 million slaves right now in the world. Men, women, and children, most of which are in India, Indonesia, Bangladesh. So now, think of that piece of clothing. If you knew that that piece of clothing was contributing to somebody being abused and suffered and the world basically becoming a toxic mess, would you maybe make a different choice if that choice was available to you? So I'm not going to get super depressing, that's it. But I think it's important because we are all responsible. We are all wearing clothes. There is not one person here who's not wearing clothes today. Well, that would be a different kind of party. next Creative Mornings. So I think it's important that we, have respect for this planet. This is our planet, and we are all responsible for what's going on. And the cool thing is that we can make a difference. You can vote with your dollar. The corporations will follow how you spend your money. Not because they care, but because they want your money. So if you start to make conscious choices with how you spend your money, it will, they'll respond to it. So that's like the hopeful part. So that is my thoughts on climate change. But as creative professionals, I think that there are a lot of climates that we are a part of. There's your personal life, there's your working life, there's the work environment, there's the economy, there's are people buying what you're selling? Is there support from the government? And then there's also this climate, your own mind, and how that affects you as a creative individual. I mean, for us, excuse me, Our livelihoods depend on our creativity. We have to be creative on demand. So I think it's important to start understanding like all these climates that we exist in and how they affect us as creative professionals. Where you grew up, as Mark said, I was born and raised in this city. This is a picture that I took 2 days ago on Spanish Banks. I walk there very regularly. It's kind of like my church. I've been coming to that beach since I was born. So naturally, in that climate, I have a real affection for nature. I feel very connected to nature. And growing up, I think every school play I ever did was about saving the planet. I was a lead singer for a play in grade 6. It was all about, it was called, I was One Small Voice, and it was all about saving the planet. So naturally, okay, I have these values ingrained in me, and when I was creating my company in 2008, those values really shaped the company that I was creating. I couldn't turn those off. So the philosophy of my company is I am love. And this for me is about coming from this place of love in all that you do and all the different facets of your life. How it kind of shows up in the business is kind of three-pronged. I consider the earth, its people, and spirit. And for earth, I use as sustainable fabrics as I can find. That's constantly changing. I never promise to be perfect, but I do promise to do the best that I can with what's available to me now. Technology is really changing. It's the fastest growing sector of textile right now, is sustainable textiles. For people, I use ethical manufacturing, 95% of which is at my own factory here in Vancouver, 5 minutes from here. The other 5% I use a fair trade factory in Nepal. And then for spirit, we sew a little label that says, I am love, into each piece of clothing, and this acts as a reminder for the wearer when they put that piece of clothing on to come from that place. Whether it's how they're speaking to themselves in the morning, or how they are treating others in their life, or how about how they go about their everyday life. Personal life climate. This is my son. I know for myself that when my personal life is stressful, that it's like a block to my creativity. And sometimes it can like really inspire you and something beautiful comes out of it. So I was in a really dysfunctional relationship for 6 years with my ex-husband. I tried to leave like a dozen times. And it wasn't until the birth of my son that I had the strength to do for my kid that I couldn't do for myself for so many years. And that was leave. And I really promised to myself at that time that I would never again abandon myself. Like, good. That's what And sometimes in your personal life, there are things going on that are out of your control. Somebody's sick, divorce, whatever. And it's not about being victim to the situation, but acknowledging it and how it is affecting you. The other is work life. So for me, when I created this company, I really wanted to make sure that I was creating a company where people were stoked to come to work. They felt valued, they felt fulfilled, they felt like they were contributing their talents and their gifts in a way that was helping something bigger than themselves. We start every group meeting with a mindful meditation together, and that's a way to make sure that we keep that line of communication open and honest and supportive with one another. Excuse me. I'm really fortunate to say that every time we host an event at the store, our clients are just such amazing people. They really are, and they're beautiful, inspiring women, and you can't really say that very often in the apparel and fashion industry, but that you feel really stoked about the people you get to meet. It's a pretty shallow industry, really. This picture is with Zoe Pollock. She's right beside me. She's a local artist. So every collection that I design, I collaborate with an artist to create the prints. And to me, collaboration is a huge part of the climate that we exist in. And it's so important to support one another. And every time we do an in-store show, the models are real women. instead of professional models. And again, it's that environment that we're creating. The other thing to consider too is the economy. Are people buying what you're selling? Are people valuing the way that you're making it? And that definitely plays a role in our success as creative professionals. The apparel industry was at one time in Vancouver a really thriving industry, but it was not really valued by the city. And so there was not a lot of support. And it's really hard for these factories to compete with international, very cheap labor. So I've been using this factory, this is one that's 5 minutes away, for the past 5 years. So 3 years I've been using it, and they were about to close. They wanted to not have to deal with it anymore. And so I bought it a lot earlier than I expected to, but I couldn't see that factory close. And you know, in hindsight, I mean, the thing that excites me is the possibility to be different. So where I see a possible success is if we're vertically integrated, if I'm selling at retail what I'm making myself, that there's possible room to take that extra margin and give it back to these people who, you know, sometimes they're just making minimum wage. There's factories in town where they're not making a minimum wage. And they are skilled laborers, they really deserve more. So because of that lack of support, a year after I bought the factory, so this was last year's Christmas, like a year ago, we were going through a serious cash flow crunch, and that's pretty common in the fashion industry. It's a really cash flow intensive business. And I thought that last Christmas I would have to close the business. And so I had handed out 3 letters of intent to my top 3 managers. One is over there. I'm not looking at you because I'm not going to cry. It was a very tearful Christmas. We love each other so much. And I was hustling my butt to try and figure out how we were going to make it through. And thankfully, the Women's Enterprise Center in Vancouver was able to give me a loan within like 2 weeks. That's the fastest they've ever released a loan. And I was able to make payroll and continue the business. So this top is called the Cecilia tee. And the woman at the WEC who really went to bat for us, her name's Cecilia. And so we created a top for her to thank her. And it's an artistry tee that I do a painting every season, and it's different every season. To say thank you. And it's that kind of support, I mean, that we need as creative individuals. We need that kind of support in order to keep going. The other thing to be aware of too, I think, is what inspires you. So for me, I'm really stoked on like growth and life lesson and learning. So it's a little bit different, but how I work is every season I consider life lesson that I'm learning at that time. This collection was called I Am Enough. This is the fall winter. Oh, nice dress on her. I'm wearing the same dress. That wasn't intentional. This is in the stores right now. It's just finishing this season. And when I was designing this collection, I was on my way to Toronto to go on Dragon's Den. That should air soon. And I was thinking like, oh man, I'm gonna be on TV. Like, fuck, I should probably lose some weight and like all this stuff. And then, you know, so I like get on the plan and I'm trying to lose weight. I'm like, you know what? This just doesn't feel good. This is not loving myself. I'm like, what if I just decided just to love myself? Like, let's just try a little experiment. Like, what if I didn't change anything other than the talk I was giving to myself? And I tried it, and it was actually really, really powerful. It took some time for it to become really true and authentic. But that's what it's about. It's like, I am enough. I am enough just as I am. I am deserving and worthy of all the dreams that I have for myself, and I can do this. So I think as creative professionals, we have we need to be constantly judging our work. And I think it's important that we are always striving to better our work and sharpen our tool. That's awesome. That's why we're here. But not the kind of negative self-talk where we align our self-worth with the quality of work that we're creating. Once we start to make our self-worth less just because of how well something sells, and it's a slippery slope, and I know for myself that it doesn't help my creative flow. It really blocks it when I start saying, oh, I'll never be as good as so-and-so, or how come I can't be as successful as so-and-so. And finally, this is the collection that's coming out in the next week. This is our spring-summer collection. And I named it Keep Steady. I think as a society, and that's another climate that we exist in, is society. And the society here compared to different societies in the world, I noticed that in Western society, we have a tendency to like always need to be happy. This is like something that we are striving for. And I think in life, by striving for that, we're kind of setting ourselves up to fail, because it's inevitable that in life you're going to have blissful times and you're also going to have challenging times. And so I had a moment with myself where I thought, maybe instead of this being the point of life and something that I should be aiming for, what if instead, while I'm riding the ebb and flow of life, that I am instead more focused on staying centered and connected. And so I think it's just as easy to lose yourself in the lows of life as it is in the highs of life. And so keep steady while you're riding that wave. And as a creative professional, I think it's really important to recognize those times where you feel really in flow. Like, ask yourself today, when do I feel really connected to my creative flow? And when do I feel really stuck? And what are those things that I could start doing even today just to move up like one little step closer to where you want to get to? I know for me personally, I have a daily practice of meditating in the morning. That for me is, I know, because I've done it for a long time, and then I've fallen off the wagon, and then I do it for a while, and I know, looking back, at the times where I was really connected is when I was meditating daily. I really aim for like 30 minutes every morning. It doesn't always happen. I'm unattached to that, but sometimes it's 5 minutes in the shower. But I know that that's my place to go to. And so, ask yourself, like, what does that look like? Where is that place where you can tap into that? And if you do it as a daily practice, it can have really profound impact on how easily you can connect to that flow. And also for me, spending time in nature. That, again, is where I find that creative flow. How are we for time? Or did I go too fast? That's it. All right. Okay. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Hi, Nicole. I'm Stephanie. Thank you for that. That was really inspiring. I'm wondering if you've ever had any moments where you've had to choose to follow your ethical values or to follow profit. When it comes to whether it's textiles or what have you, but have you ever had anything like that where you've had a tough decision to make?
Constantly. It's probably the hardest part is that I feel like I'm constantly having to compromise. That's why I say that I'm not perfect. I'm not promising to be perfect. I'm promising to do the best that I can. Not so much, profit, definitely, but more in like the sustainability and the fabrics that are available to me. Like, I may have this idea of the perfect fabric that I want to go and create, and that's just not available to me right now. Or maybe I can buy 500 meters, and once I hit 5,000 meters, they'll do it in organic for me. So like, it's just where I'm at right now, and I have to constantly be compromising and figure out, okay, well, what's the best thing that we can do right now, and how are we going to make baby steps to get there? My end vision is, and hopefully within like 10 to 20 years, I'd like to create a system that's like closed loop, zero waste system. And there's a lot of things that are going to need to go into place to create that, and it really excites me to hopefully be able to show that it's possible. But then there's this huge gap between, okay, there's the dream, and what can we do right now? Is that enough? Is that answer? Yeah? Yeah.
That your answer, is that me?
I'll stand.
Your answer reminded me of what I took away from your whole talk that related to sort of the broader topic of climate, right? Because my wife and I are constantly looking at baby steps we can make But, you know, to get,
Yeah.
to be a contributor or to be at least less damaging, we can't solve the problem.
Yeah.
But, you know, then we have those judgmental friends, we all have them, and say, oh, Mark, did you drive here?
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, like
Yeah.
really? No, I walked here in my Birkenstocks. Of course I drove here.
It's so
But we
true,
all,
and people
we all need to be a part of the solution in whatever way we can, and not beat ourselves up.
Totally,
That we're
yeah.
still part of an antiquated system that
Yeah,
is
and
broken.
I personally think it's really important not to get righteous
Yeah.
too, because then there's the spirit element. Remember the three? If you start to get really out of balance, where you're like perfect no matter what, and like and then you're like losing sense of like your life and your friends and what's real, then there's no point. You know, I think it's important that everything sort of stays in balance, and judging yourself and making yourself feel bad because today you ate meat or something. You know, like it's
Bacon, actually it's bacon.
yeah, right. So I think it's
Made by Mark Brand's team, actually.
So it's important to you know, be nice to yourself too in the process, and think about little things that you can do in your life.
I'm gonna go this side.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm wondering if you have a sense of how your work gets adopted by kind of the wider kind of fashion industry, like how innovators like yourself in this thing, how it kind of trickles down to the wider industry, and if you've seen it happen in any way.
So just so I make sure I understand what you're asking, so how like innovators trickle into mainstream and big corporations? Like what we're...
Well, I imagine that, I don't know who your customers are, but I imagine that what you're selling is, you know, a designer item, and isn't something that, you know, the kind of average or below average income person from Vancouver is coming into your store to purchase clothing there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sort of wondering if you have an idea, if you've had any thoughts or any idea about how, you know, the change, how you're helping to make change sort of as a sort of a ripple, like a stone in a pond.
I think I get it. That like really we perceive that being able to live totally sustainable is like for rich people. Is that a little bit of what we're getting to as well? Okay. So we, as a society, have been like really spoiled with cheap clothes, and it's really important to consider that, okay, maybe it's only $3, so it's cheap right there, but for the whole planet, it's really expensive because it is destroying the planet. There's cancer. It's like, well, I don't know, it's like 4 in 8 people right now are getting cancer, directly linked to like all the toxins in the biosphere. There's a lot of expensive issues that come from trying to do things cheaply. There's a few points I'm gonna touch on. So the other thing too is that we've become accustomed to being able to buy things for really cheap, and so now we view other things as expensive, and I think it requires a whole shift in how we buy. Instead of buying lots of stuff every season and eating one of everything, maybe you decide to buy just a few things. Like if you go through your closet right now, you could probably get rid of half of it and you wouldn't even notice. So, you know, like really choosing wisely the pieces that you bring into your wardrobe, living with less, making sure you're buying things that are gonna last. So for me, design-wise, I wanna make clothes that are gonna last for a long time. They're made really well. They're interesting, but not trend-driven. For me, trendy is trashy. It's about having a personal style. It's about, you know, buying pieces that are going to, you'll be able to wear in a lot of different ways, but that you're going to have for years, like you won't get tired of it. So there's a classicness to the aesthetic. And I could talk a lot about my design philosophy too, but I want to touch on a few other things for you too. And so I think we need to change our buying habits first so that it can be affordable. So like even for myself, like I used to buy cheap shoes. I'd wear them for one season, they'd be done. Now I buy expensive shoes, I take care of them, I have them for 7 years. So it's like, you know, the same thing. You buy a cheap t-shirt and it's done after one season. So what was the other thing that you were asking me about? Oh, about corporations too, right? About how if I see that trend trickling. I think there's definitely a lot of the bigger corporations that are adopting organic, which is awesome. These people who are like, fuck H&M, how they're greenwashing with their organic. Hey, like if they're gonna start buying up some organic cotton and start thriving that sector of the market, then that's awesome. We don't wanna be like, sorry, like being eco is only for people who really mean it, and like this is like something we want everybody to do. For example, like Walmart now carries organic yogurt, not because Walmart cares, but because they're responding to a loss in sales because people are wanting more organic yogurt. So the more and more that it just becomes a norm, like that's where I get stoked, is where we don't even have to have this conversation anymore. It's just the way that businesses practice and that people practice, that we live in harmony with the planet. So for myself, like yes, I do make designer clothing. I'm always trying to make it as accessible as possible to people. So I wouldn't say that our prices are really high. For what you're getting way more than what you're paying for. Our price points really compared to like Anthropologie, and there it's like made in China or Bangladesh even, and out of polyester. Here it's made locally and out of like silk and natural fibers. So you know what, we're not inflating the prices. What really stokes me is, like when you walk into my store, I'm not preaching to you about the environment. I know this morning we were talking about climate change, so I said a few things. But I want everybody to feel welcome in the store. I want them to feel inspired, not really heavy about it. And I want this to be attractive to the mainstream. I don't want it to be a niche thing. Is there any other little points? There's so much we could talk about in that one question. Is that good? Yeah. If there's anything else there you want me to expand on, feel free.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for justice-friendly knowledge you have shared, I think. What I find is it's very interesting, the metaphor you use about climate. I think it was very nice that you balance between your work life and the family life and so on. And I like this concept of meditation. But I always tell people, take 1 hour holiday. Because for some people, they can't sit for 1 hour meditating, but they can take a bus ride, go out for a swim, or share food or something. My question is about your clothing designs. Do you cater for markets for women who are grandmothers or elderly? Because I think women tend to be forgotten once they are 50 or 40 even. And I think as grandparents, I think many times grandmothers are always telling me that we need to be included in fashion design. And my second question is about the design. I promote every person is a fruit tree, and we are orchards of fruit trees. Do you have any, in your design, do you consider putting fruit trees in your designs?
On your second question, we use fabric that is made from selectively harvested trees, FSC trees. There's a 10-cell that we use. So trees do show up, and we're working with an organization called Canopy, who has done huge things for the paper industry already in not using endangered forests. They have totally got the paper industry to commit to like 30% of recycled paper, and then they saw the whole bunch of pulp was going to textile. So now they are taking on the textile industry. We were #1 to sign on with them. We're just this tiny little person. Now they've got like Zara, H&M, Stella McCartney, and I was sitting at a table with all of these people talking about this commitment that we're making. It was really very cool for me. The first question was about grandmothers. Yes, awesome, thank you. So that is part of designing for me, is making sure that the clothes that we create, there's a wide range of women that can wear the clothes. My grandmother wears my clothes, my mother wears my clothes. Our target market might be a 35-year-old professional mom. That is who, it's important to know who your target is so that you're not becoming something for everybody. But I always make sure that the clothes not only can fit different sizes and shapes of women, but also different ages. Because you're right, they do start to feel forgotten. And that comes back to the design aesthetic, that it's something that you want to be able to wear for many years. And so there's something in creating something that's classic. that will, you could wear 20 years from now and it would still be relevant and appropriate. So yeah, and we have a lot of clients that come into our store that are 65, and they love it because it's not boring, but it's still age appropriate for them. Whereas a lot of the stuff that is made for them, they feel is kind of dowdy and not, not classy. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm curious if, kind of sticking to the foundation you were saying of I am love, if always choosing that or choosing that as much as you can over profit or other kind of compromises, does that build kind of advocates and these people who stick with you because of that versus, for lack of a better term, like selling out or picking profit?
Definitely. And, it's an interesting thing with profit. We relate profit to money, and money is it's a made-up thing. Like, humans created money. And to me, it is, yes, our society exists where we need to be conscious of money. We need money to survive. That exists. But there are so many other forms, and money is energy, basically. It's an energy transaction. And there are so many other forms of energy that are important in a business. Is there a learning transaction? Is there a respect transaction and communication? So there's a lot of things that we place value in that doesn't necessarily have a dollar figure attached to it. And so I think it's important to start shifting, and I kind of I'm not sure exactly where society is going to go, but a friend of mine was telling me about something called Time Republic. And it's an idea of sharing time. So it's a website, you go on there and you bank time. So say you want to learn how to play guitar. Somebody spends 2 hours teaching you guitar, and then to pay back, maybe you teach somebody how to cook for 2 hours. And so it's sharing time, which we place value on, and looking at all these different shared economies that could exist. Now wait, I want to make sure, sorry, I get a little bit going on and excited about something. So you were asking me about profit and how people get aligned to my company and don't sell out, right?
Like building advocates who kind of stick with you.
Right. And that is really cool. That is something that we see. So when clients come into the store, because it's not in your face, they get in there and they're like, oh, this is really cool. I like the aesthetic and this is beautiful and this could work for my life. That's where I want to get them first, that they like the product, that they like the design of it. And then they find out all of this value added stuff, or they see me talk about stuff and they're like, wow, that really aligns with me and how I want to show up in the world. And so then their hearts are in it, and it becomes this beautiful community of support where, for me, the clothing is just the platform that I've chosen. No matter what I chose to do with this lifetime, I would be sharing this message. And clothes is a really awesome platform because everybody wears clothes, and it's a way to engage people in a different possibility. I think there's a possibility out there of existing differently in the world that we are just kind of tapping into. I don't know.
We are running out of time. We're going to do one more question.
We can't just
have
hang out here all day. It's so fun.
Who has a really, really powerful question? I have a hand over here. How good is it?
I'll try and keep my answers more short so more people can.
Quick.
Oh, I did have a question. Mine's super quick. We're just wondering, are you B Corp certified?
Not yet.
Not yet, but
Yeah.
on your way?
We haven't started the process yet, but I would like to one day.
Cool.
Yeah.
The triple bottom line certification process.
Yep. And right now, cash is really tight, and so it's hard for me to justify spending that money on the audit. So at some point, I will.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. B Corp, it's basically like a third-party audit that you get a stamp as a B Corp, and other consumers, it's a consumer-facing certification that the consumer can trust that you are doing what you say you're doing around sustainability and fair wages and stuff. Yeah, it's awesome. The other one I want to do is 1% for the planet. also on the list.
Are you interested in exporting to Europe?
Exporting to Europe? Yeah, definitely, once it makes sense. I think first, North America is where I'd like to get comfortable first, and then to Europe, Australia, and Japan, yeah. I would say like in 20 years, I'd like to have 60 stores globally. That's my goal. And to build a co-op style factory in a developing country too, that would be nice.
Well, we're grateful because we when that happens, and it will, we can all say that we knew her when she was just this Vancouverite, some tree-hugging, hippy-dippy fashion designer.
I will always stay that.
Thank you.